Commercial air travel operated on trust. There were no metal detectors, no mandatory luggage checks, and no ID requirements. You could walk up to a counter, buy a ticket with cash, and step directly onto an airplane. On the afternoon of Thanksgiving Eve, a man in his mid-40s approached the Northwest Orient counter at Portland International Airport. He paid cash for a one-way 30-minute flight to Seattle and gave the name Dan Cooper. Cooper took seat 18E in the very back row of the Boeing 727. He ordered a bourbon and 7-Up, lit a cigarette, and handed a handwritten note to the nearest flight attendant. Assuming he was just slipping her his phone number, she dropped it into her purse. Cooper leaned in and quietly told her she had better look at it. The note was written in neat, all-capital letters. It stated he had a bomb. When she asked to see it, he unlatched the briefcase to reveal a large battery wired to 8 red cylinders. He calmly asked her to sit beside him and write down his demands. Without shouting, drawing a weapon, or alerting any other passenger, Cooper turned a routine commuter hop into a high-stakes hostage crisis. The flight crew immediately radioed his terms to the ground. Upon landing in Seattle, Cooper wanted $200,000 in $20 bills, equivalent to over $1 million today, and 4 parachutes. The demand for exactly 4 parachutes was a highly specific, tactical choice. It forced the authorities to immediately assume he planned to take at least one hostage with him on the jump. That assumption guaranteed the FBI wouldn't risk supplying him with dummy or sabotaged gear. After getting his money and releasing the passengers in Seattle, Cooper directed a skeleton crew to fly south toward Mexico. He dictated a rigid set of flight parameters: stay below an altitude of 10,000 feet, keep the cabin unpressurized, and leave the landing gear deployed. This 727 wing schematic illustrates his crucial demand. Cooper required the flaps lowered exactly 15 degrees. This configuration alters aerodynamic lift, allowing a heavy commercial jet to safely cruise at a crawling 115 miles per hour without stalling out. Once airborne, he ordered the remaining crew into the cockpit and closed the partition. At 8:13 p.m., somewhere over southern Washington, the pilot felt a sudden upward pitch in the aircraft's tail section. The cabin pressure fluctuated. Cooper had opened the rear door and lowered the plane's aft air stair. Wearing a business suit and slip-on loafers, he strapped the cash to his body, walked down the stairs, and dropped into the pitch-black, freezing rain. In that single leap, he abandoned the contained environment of a hijacked aircraft and vanished into a sprawling, densely forested wilderness, leaving law enforcement with thousands of square miles of unforgiving terrain to search. When the 727 landed in Reno, federal agents swarmed the cabin and found it completely empty. The military deployed helicopters, fixed-wing aircraft, and ground troops to scour the suspected drop zone, but they found absolutely no trace of the hijacker or his parachute. The only physical item Cooper left behind was resting on seat 18E, a cheap black clip-on necktie from JCPenney. Using an electron microscope, investigators identified minute metallic particles embedded in the threads, including unalloyed titanium. In 1971, pure titanium was exceptionally rare, found almost exclusively in specialized aerospace production floors, like the Boeing plants in the Pacific Northwest. Investigators originally theorized Cooper might be an amateur thrill-seeker. The chemical evidence told a different story. The microscopic residue pointed to a highly specialized insider who likely knew the exact mechanical quirks of the Boeing 727 because he worked around them every day. The investigation stalled entirely until February 1980. An 8-year-old boy was digging a campfire pit in the sand at Tina Bar, a beachfront along the Columbia River, when he uncovered 3 decaying bundles of $20 bills. FBI technicians verified the serial numbers. They were a perfect match. It was the original extortion money and the first confirmed piece of evidence discovered outside the aircraft. This timeline graphic visualizes a major forensic problem with the discovery. Biologists analyzed diatoms, microscopic algae, found on the decaying bills. The specific diatoms they found only bloomed during the spring, meaning the money did not enter the water in November when Cooper jumped. The physical evidence contradicted the geographic models. If the money went into the water months later, it meant Cooper survived the freezing jump and buried the cash later, or the bundles washed down from a secondary location long after he succumbed to the elements. Over the 45-year lifespan of the active investigation, the FBI vetted over 1,000 serious suspects against the flight crew's descriptions and this composite sketch. They looked at men like Ted Braden, a Vietnam veteran whose elite special forces training in high-altitude parachuting matched the profile perfectly, especially combined with his known history of financial crimes. They investigated Richard McCoy, a former Green Beret who executed a nearly identical copycat hijacking on a Boeing 727 less than 5 months later, successfully bailing out over Utah with $500,000. Yet McCoy was ruled out. When agents showed his photograph to the 3 flight attendants who spent hours sitting next to Cooper, they explicitly rejected it, pointing to distinct differences in his facial structure. This became the recurring theme of the investigation. Compelling suspects emerged with military backgrounds, similar facial features, and even deathbed confessions, but investigators could never establish a single definitive genetic or physical link tying any of them to the plane. Cooper's escape proved that the commercial aviation system could be held for ransom. In 1972, hijackers attempted 15 similar extortion plots. While none were successful, the volume of threats forced an immediate response. By 1973, the FAA enacted sweeping security mandates. Airlines were legally required to physically search all carry-on baggage, and the first universal metal detectors were installed in terminals nationwide. They also neutralized the specific vulnerability of the 727. Every aircraft was retrofitted with an exterior aerodynamic lock called the Cooper vane, making it physically impossible to lower the rear air stair while the plane is in flight. Buying a ticket under a fake name and walking straight to your gate was over. A single extortionist had exposed the fatal flaw in commercial air travel, forcing the entire industry to lock its doors. In July 2016, the FBI formally suspended the active investigation to reallocate resources. They closed a 66-volume case file that represented millions of dollars and 4.5 decades of relentless searching. Despite massive advancements in forensic science and the global fascination surrounding his jump, Dan Cooper left no definitive trace. He executed a flawless disappearance, resulting in the only documented unsolved case of air piracy in commercial aviation history.